show you how, when the rabbis say something which sounds very far from the text, very fanciful, that it can be based on very precise literal reasoning. They just, in some cases, don't share the reasoning with you. They take it for granted that you're well-informed and thoughtful and critical on your own, and you have to pray for divine assistance and work on these things year after year after year, and then, if God favors you, you find some of them. Take a look at page 103. This is the story of the binding of Isaac, and they set out on their journey. Very top of the page, the third day, Abraham raised his eyes, perceived the place from afar. Abraham said to his young men, "Stay here by yourselves with the donkey, while I and the lad will go yonder. We will worship and we will return to you." Now the rabbis comment, "Stay here by yourselves with the donkey." Aha! The boys are staying with the donkey. Say the rabbis, that means that there's some essential connection, sharing, I would say almost equality between the boys and the donkey. And that indicates that slaves have some element in their status which is not consistent with all normal human status. I think the reader is mystified. What are you building on? It says stay here with the donkey. What else would you expect Abraham to say? Stay without the donkey? Set the donkey free? Of course, stay here with the donkey, wait for us to come back. Seems like a perfectly innocent phrase which has no particular significance whatsoever. Now, the background for this is hundreds of pages away. Take a look on page 859, middle of the book of Numbers. Here, the Jewish people are on the boundary of countries that border on the land of Israel, and they know that the Jewish people is going into the land of Israel, and they're afraid that they're in the way, and there may be some reason for hostilities, and they're looking for a way to protect themselves against the Jewish people. In particular, the king of Moab wants to recruit a well-known non-Jewish prophet, was a genuine prophet, evil as the day is long, but then genuine prophet, to curse the Jewish people. So he sends a delegation to this man whose name in Hebrew is Bilam. Why they write B-A-L-A-A-M, I have no clue. 9 at the top of the page. So they came to ask Bilam to come with them and curse the Jewish people. And he says, "I only do what God tells me. Stay overnight. We'll see what God will tell me." God came to Bilam and said to him, "Who are these men with you?" Bilam said to God, "Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab, sent to me. Behold, the people coming out of Egypt has covered the surface of the earth. Now go and curse it for me. Perhaps I'll be able to make war against it and drive it away." That's the proposition. God said to Bilam, "You shall not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for it is blessed." Absolute no. So, Bilam says to the people in the morning, to the delegation, the answer is no. Pay careful attention to the vocabulary and the phraseology. You can see that he was weaseling a little bit. At any rate, they come back to the king of Moab and say, "We got to know." King of Moab says, "Maybe the delegation I sent wasn't honorable enough, wasn't august enough." And he sends another delegation of higher officials to plead with Bilam to come and curse the Jewish people. So they come again, and he says, "I don't do anything without God's okay. Stay overnight. We'll see what God will say." Verse 20 at the bottom of the page. God came to Bilam at night and said to him, "If the men came to summon you, arise and go with them, but only the thing that I shall speak to you, that shall you do." So the reader says, aha, he now is getting permission to go. Maybe it pays to push God a little bit. Okay, he said no. He said no, but if you push, maybe you can negotiate something. Maybe you can make a deal. Okay? So anyway, he gets permission to go. 21 at the bottom of the page. Bilam arose in the morning and saddled his she-donkey and went with the officers of Moab. God's wrath flared because he was going. At this point, I think the reader wants to call a foul. Excuse me. Maybe it wasn't nice for Bilam to try again and push, but you did give him permission. You gave him permission. So why are you angry at him for going? Now, I think those questions are quite reasonable when you're reading it in English. And those of you who know me know that I encourage you to ask questions. And I encourage you to think independently and critically. The answers to the questions are on the surface of the Hebrew reading. Let me show you that. On the top of 859, verse 12, where God tells him not to go. Now, if you look at the Hebrew, it's 5 lines down from the beginning, in the middle of the line, right after the 2 dots. Vayomer Elokim Bilam, God said to Bilam, Lo selech, do not go, I mohem. Imohem is a contraction. It's im haim. Im means with, and haim means them. So it's contracted into one word in biblical Hebrew, imahem. Do not go with them. But notice that the word for with here is im, ayin mem. Now, go down to the bottom of the page. We can start the 3rd line from the bottom, 3 words from the end, where he gets permission to go. God says to him, Kum, lech, get up, go, itam. Itam is a contraction of es, haim. Es in biblical Hebrew can mean with. So he's getting permission to go, but he's getting permission to go with, described with the word es. He was forbidden at the top to go im. He's given permission to go with the word es. That's not obviously a change of mind. It's not obviously a change of mind. At this point, the careful reader will ask, well, is there a difference between es and im? What would the difference be? And how would it be relevant? But now watch, even before we do that, watch how it solves the next question. What happens when he goes? Bottom line, 4 words from the end in the Hebrew. Vayelech im. Sorry, Moab. He went im. That's what at the top of the page he was forbidden to do. To go im. He never got permission to go im. He got permission to go es. To go im is something that was forbidden and remained forbidden. That's why God gets angry on the next page. So God's getting angry. The idea that God changed his mind and negotiated and all the rest, in Hebrew, it's doesn't start to be a question. Are we together so far? Now the word im in Hebrew connotes a sharing, an identification, an integration. The word for a people in Hebrew is am, spelled with the exact same letters, ayin mem. So im, meaning with, means a kind of withness, a kind of being together that you make out of it a people. A people sharing common goals, common ideas, common priorities, common practices of life, common strategies, having a common national identity. That's what im connotes. Es has no such connotation. Es means with without any connotation of identification or sharing at all. So, at the top of the page, when Bilam wants permission to go and curse the Jewish people, God says to him, don't go im. Don't identify with them. Don't share their goals. Cursing the Jewish people is an impossibility. And it's totally negative. The bottom of the page, when he gets permission, God says to him, you want to walk down the same road? You want to accompany them physically? I'll give you permission to do that. But only that which I command you will you say, it says in the verse explicitly. What does Bilam do? He goes im. He goes in order to curse, just like they wanted to curse. He never got permission to do that. So God gets angry that he's going. Are we together so far? Okay, now, yeah.
Is there any reference that he did this on purpose, or maybe interpreted the prophecy wrong?
He's a true prophet of God. He's not in trouble with is or im, and they didn't show him. This is not a mistake that you would expect a person like that to make. Okay, now let's go back to, what was it, 102? 103. 103. So, in verse 5 at the top of the page it says, and Abraham said to his young men, stay here by yourselves with the donkey. What question leaps to your mind?
Which was?
Which with? Exactly the way I would say. Which with is it? Is it the S with or the M with? Well, let's take a look in the Hebrew. The second line, 2 words from the end of the line in the Hebrew. Shulachem, stay here by yourselves. Po, here. Im hachamor, with the donkey. So already your suspicions ought to be aroused. With sharing, identification, having the same equality with the donkey. But it's worse than that, or better than that, for the point that this far I got by myself. After this, one of my chavrusa said, turn back and take a look 2 verses before, and you'll see that it's wrapped in gold. Verse 3, Abraham woke up early in the morning, he saddled his donkey, he took his 2 young men with him. The 2 young men with Abraham. And the question what leaps to mind is? Which with? Okay. Take it in the Hebrew, second to last line at the beginning. Vayikach eshnei na'arav, he took his 2 young men, ito, with him. Ito is a contraction of es, who. So, together with Abraham, it's es. Together with the donkey, it's im. That's striking. The relationship with Abraham is superficial and non-committal, and the relationship with the donkey is integrated, identification, sharing, equality. That definitely says that there's some connection there between these 2 young men and the donkey. And that's what Chazal are building their remark on, that the text here forces you to say that there's some connection between the 2 young men and the donkey. Are we together so far?
Is this a law throughout the whole Torah?
Well,
every time it says im, it indicates a common purpose.
I'll tell you, every time you have both s and im in the context, it will indicate that preference. Sometimes when you have only one, then it'll depend upon the things that are going on in the context. But if you have a clear contrast between the 2, then for sure that's built in. Okay. If it's uniform throughout the context, then I'm not sure. Now, if you look now more carefully at verse 3, you'll see that this explains a particular structure in verse 3, which also I think this is like icing on the cake. It makes it even better. Again, verse 3. Abraham woke up early, saddled his donkey. He took his 2 young men with him and Isaac his son. We wouldn't write that. We would never write the words that way. No newspaper editor would allow you to write that. What's wrong? How should it be written?
His son.
Oh, I see. His son Isaac. Okay. No, but I mean, there's something...
Isaac before Abraham?
Before Abraham? Just give me the words. How would you write it?
He took his 2 young men, and Isaac was him.
That's right. How many people are going on this trip? 4. Abraham, Isaac, and the 2 young men. Right? So, aren't they going together? I mean, presumably they're going together. So Abraham's going, and he's taking. What is he taking? He's taking the 2 young men and his son with him.
So you didn't mention the donkey?
Maybe, but to say he took with him his 2 young men and Isaac, I'm sorry, let me say it right. To say he took his 2 young men with him and Isaac, putting Isaac outside the with him, is very peculiar. Of course Isaac's going with him. It makes it sound like he took his 2 young men with him and Isaac not with him. But he is with him, and he is going with him. But given what I told you, it's perfect, because here the with him is S, the superficial, non-sharing, non-identification. For that, Isaac is outside. Isaac is definitely outside. It works like,
What's the implication?
that this superficial relationship, which is going to stand in contrast to the donkey, Isaac's not part of that. That's all. And he certainly isn't part of that. Now, I want to show you something in the Hebrew, lest you reflect on this, read it again yourself, or tell it to somebody. I don't want you to get confused by the grammar. Let me just finish this and I'll take your question. Now, look again, 2 lines from the bottom in the Hebrew. Vayikach es shnei na'arav ito ve'es Yitzchak beno. Golly, there are a lot of S's here. There's Vayikach es shnei na'arav ito, which is another S, ve'es, which is another S. Suppose somebody says, hey, look, es Yitzchak beno. Doesn't that mean with Isaac? That's S, yes. S and Ace are the same thing. The difference in S and Ace is only whether there's a musical note on the word. When there's a musical note, it's read Ace. No musical note, it's read S. That's all. It's the same word. So, isn't S used for Yitzchak also? The answer is no. No, because S in Hebrew grammar almost always has a function of identifying a direct object of a verb. On rare occasions, maybe 2% of the time, it means with. 98% of the time, it identifies the direct object of a verb. So it reads like this. Vayikach, and he took. S, direct object. What is it that he took? Shnei na'arav, his 2 young men. Ito, with him. That one means with. Ve'es, and he took. What's the direct object of with? Of take? Yitzchak beno, Isaac his son. He took the 2 young men, and he took Isaac. 2 of the S, 2 occurrences of the word S indicate the 2 direct objects, the 2 young men and Isaac. And the ito is the only with that's in the sentence. That with is governs the 2 young men and not Isaac. And what I'm telling you now is not controversial. No one will disagree with that. Okay, so this is where the rabbis get their comment from, and it's inescapable. It's inescapable. It's right there in the words. Of course, you have to think of looking on page 859. How are you going to find that? Well, you read the commentators. I'm not mistaken, the Malbim points this out. Read the commentators. They know the whole text by heart, and they make connections like that for you. But I stress on this case, I'll give you a few more, because very often, and many people are inundated by a thoughtless mindset, typical of academia, where the rabbis are not taken seriously at all. Yeah, they made up comments to suit their times and their personal sensibilities and psychologies and what they get paid for and what they thought of over a coffee break. And then when that makes no sense on the surface, the reaction is, sure, it doesn't make any sense, because they never make any sense, because they're just playing around. They're not doing anything serious. And my experience has been the exact opposite. When the rabbis make a comment, it's dead serious. And given the number of ones that I've been able to decipher, if there are ones that I haven't been able to decipher, I trust that more time, more divine providence will enable me to decipher them. Are we together so far? This one? Yeah.
The fact that it says S with Yitzchak, does that mean that he's also detached from him as far as like what they're going to do?
Which word are you commenting on or asking about?
What is it? Pasuk Gimel.
Which word?
The S Yitzchak beno.
So that's what I just commented on. There, the word S is a direct object. It tells you that he took Isaac. So I just commented. Let's look again. Start at the beginning of that line.
Yeah.
Vayikach S, that's one S.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Ito is S again. Right? Ito is S who? That's the second S. Ve'es is the third S. So there are 3 S's in this short phrase. In half a line, there are 3 S's. 2 of them are indicators of a direct object. What is it that he took? One S says that he took the 2 young men. The third one says he took Isaac. The only one that means with is the middle one, Ito.
So for Yitzchak, there's no with.
Correct. There's no with at all.
What does that imply?
That implies that whatever this with describes, Isaac's not part of it. Now, when you understand that this with is S, and 2 verses later the with is im, and that means that its connection to the donkey, Isaac's not part of that.
So what's he part of?
He's being taken by Abraham along, of course, and it's just non-committal, non-commentary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Why if Bill knew the difference, why did he change his mind if he said he wasn't going to go against God?
Number one, because he said that to them. He said that to them. He was hot to curse the Jewish people. First of all, he's offered a lot of money. And he wanted to curse the Jewish people anyway. And he was dying to do this now. God didn't strictly change his mind, but he did get permission to go in some form or other. That he didn't get first time round. Of course, he wasn't forbidden to do it either, but he didn't get it first time round. So, part of it is self-deception, overwhelming desire. Part of it is just, yeah.
An aside question: what does it mean when it says the Jews have covered the surface of the earth? When he was relaying, these people have come out of Mitzrayim and are covering the surface of the earth.
You're talking about approximately 3 million people. When you look at them, if they're centralized,
Okay, so it's something special.
you see a mass of people.
So,
Yeah, it is something special, but it's going to Kabbalistic things and stuff and so on. Yeah, everything. All of these kinds of descriptions will have a meaning like that, yeah. But I just give you a hint. It's tied to the fact that all he asks for is a curse to be able to drive them away. He doesn't ask for the strength to conquer them, enslave them, annihilate them. He just wants to make sure they don't go into the land of Israel. That's a whole subtext, the Shem Shmuel. That's a whole long essay on the subtext of what's going on here. It's very interesting. That's all he asks for. You'll think it's an enemy of the Jewish people, would ask for more. No, that's all he wants. Yes.
Would Bilham have been able to tell the difference between the two widths based off of hearing?
Oh,
them
sure.
spoken?
Oh, yes. Now, see, we Ashkenazi Jews are handicapped here because when we say them the same. Strictly speaking, they are pronounced quite differently. The ayin is a guttural in correctly pronounced Hebrew. I'm saying that on a historical basis. Yaakov Kamenetsky said it. And it's something like M. And the Aleph has a breathy sound, which I can't imitate. If you listen to Taimani speak, you'll hear every word, every letter, and every letter with or without a dot has a different pronunciation. So there's no question. In fact, the writer of the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Sakara, writes that if you don't discriminate between an ayin and an aleph in your pronunciation, you are invalid to read the Torah in the synagogue. So, according to Yosef Karo, he wouldn't have put up with our Ashkenazi way of reading the Torah. So in pronunciation, they're definitely different.
Would he have been speaking Hebrew though?
Sorry?
Would Bilham have been
Oh,
speaking
if
Hebrew?
not, then the translation will be a translation that preserves that difference of meaning.
Okay.
we do this in Derech Hashem. Prophets receive the message with all its implications.
Okay, look on page 795. And this one's amazing because what the rabbis say seems to be the direct opposite of what the verse says. Chapter 12. Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses regarding the Cushite woman whom he had married, for he married a Cushite woman. I don't know. The first 16 times I read that, it sounds to me like they're complaining about his marriage. They have some complaint against his marriage. Whatever that might be, but they're upset with him because he married a Cushite woman. The rabbis say the exact opposite. This reference to the Cushite woman is a reference to Sipporah, his wife, who isn't Cushite. She's Midian. Okay, that's another problem. And the rabbis say what happened was that since the revelation at Sinai, Moses separated from his wife. He separated from her. And they're upset with Moses for separating from his wife. I read that and I said, listen, this got to make sense. Where in the words do they see any clue that what they're complaining about is a separation?
It seems pretty obvious to me. They're saying that they're speaking against Moses, as in against Moses himself, not necessarily his marrying, but against Moses regarding his behavior towards her. So not necessarily her, but regarding his behavior towards her.
Good. I think that's right. I was going to come to that at the end, but I think you're right. A careful reading softens the question. Still, regarding his behavior, I suppose that leaves it open that it could be any kind of behavior. That softens the question against the reading of Chazal. I agree with you. But what seals it is the next verse. Look at the next verse. They said, Was it only to Moses that Hashem spoke? Did he not speak to us as well? Okay, let's try this on. Let's try this on the way I boldly read the verse the first time, and let's try it on the way the rabbis read the verse. Who's Moses to go marrying a Cushite woman? Pah, Cushite women? That's not a marriage worthy of Moses. Look! Did God speak only to Moses? He spoke to us also. Okay, so he spoke to you also. So what are you campaigning for? You also want to marry Cushite women or Cushite people? You're pining after Cushite marriages? And what's the connection here? God spoke to us also, so therefore he shouldn't have married a Cushite woman? What's it got to do with them? Now read it the way the rabbis read it. Moses separated from his wife. Who does he think he is? Does he think that because he's a prophet, he can't live together with his wife? Does he think being a prophet makes him so holy that he can't live together with his wife? Look, God spoke to us as well. We didn't separate from our husband and wife. We didn't separate from our spouses. We know very well that prophecy doesn't require separating from your spouse. So he had no right to separate from her. If you read it the way the rabbis read it, the continuation is perfect. I think that seals the rabbinic reading of the first verse. And then, when I present this, I usually come to your point. If you look more carefully at the first verse, it isn't so obvious that it's talking specifically about the fact that he married her. It's more general than that. It's complaining about his behavior towards her, which could have been marrying her or supporting her or, how he treats her at supper or separating from her. It's more general. And then reading verse 2, I think, seals it. Yeah.
Last time we spoke about this once before, and I brought this up last time. But if you read this passage and put emphasis on the word married, it sounds exactly as you would. So it would sound Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses regarding the Cushite woman he had married, for he married a Cushite woman. It's as if like if you emphasize the fact that he married her, then the transgression becomes against the marriage itself, against the covenant or like the agreement of marriage, the holiness of that.
Okay, I hear that, but now I want to read into it what he said.
Mm-hmm.
If the complaint is against his marrying a Cushite woman, the whole middle phrase should have been left out.
Right, but I'm saying the exact opposite. I'm saying that he's transgressing, that they're not complaining against the marriage.
Oh, you're reinforcing what
I'm
he said.
reinforcing the point. I'm saying that the second line
I
is...
see, you're reading it. I didn't hear you. You're saying,
saying
for he married her and he's responsible to her and he shouldn't have separated from her.
Exactly. So,
very good. In other words, let me sum up before you go. So in other words, it comes out like this. If they were complaining against the marriage, I don't think I thought of that either. If the complaint is against the marriage, the whole middle phrase should have been left out. It should have said, Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses, for he married a Cushite woman. That would be very clear. It's complaining about the marriage. Now we've been pointing out that it says, regarding the Cushite woman, that means some behavior or other. That's at least very general. Now you're saying the last phrase coming on the heels of regarding the Cushite woman is, look, he married her, he has responsibilities to her, and he shouldn't have taken leave of her.
In my reading of this, you don't even need the next line to reinforce it. I think you could get that just from this line as long as you emphasize the word married.
Okay, I hear you. Very good. Yeah.
Two questions. According to your reading, then, what do you do with the whole last clause? For he had married a Cushite woman. What function is that clause serving?
Well, so he says his emphasis, right? He says his emphasis.
He married her, therefore he can't do anything.
I'll tell you what the commentators say. She wasn't Cushite. She was. Now this is prejudicial. Maybe I should turn off the recordings.
But because she was pretty, they didn't want to speak.
Oh, so now Cushite was a word identifying a group of people who, in the Moors of the time, were considered to be ugly. There is a biblical style where, when you don't want to say something straight out, you say the opposite of what you mean, and the sensitive listener understands that it's the opposite of what you mean. Okay? Now, let's see. Moses separated from his wife. That they knew. Why did he separate? How do they know it's because Moses thinks he's so holy because he's a high prophet that he can't live with his wife? Man, how do they know that that's Moses' reasoning or that's Moses' motivation? How do they know that? Well, what are the alternatives? Maybe she's just not good looking. You get tired of her, right? No.
Well, judging-
Cushite here is a backwards term for beauty. Maybe her behavior isn't fitting for him. No, Cushite here is a backwards term for beauty, even in behavior. So they're stressing, listen, she had every possible qualification for being respected by him and honored by him, and the marriage being carried out by him. So if he separated from her, the only possible reason could be that is because of his prophecy. And there we're going to nail him. After all, we're also prophets, so we didn't separate. No, God didn't tell us to separate. We had no indication we should separate. And that being the case, we think that he's making a mistake. So that would be the reason for saying it twice, because you want to have that on record.
And what's the Lamed doing in the Lakach? What do you need the Lamed there for?
1 second.
The taker.
No, it's a verb. It's a past tense verb.
Is the Lamed part of the Shurish?
Sure. Yeah. You think it's?
Like each
Yeah,
one?
no, it's
Okay.
not. It's not the
It's
infinitive.
not an infinitive. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Question?
Kind of. I mean, what's the point of doing the whole opposite thing? Why would they do that?
Yeah. Let me give you an example of where this is pretty clear. Rashi even commented on it there.
I get it, but why be sarcastic? Why?
Yeah, and it's also
No,
it's
because
really
when
difficult
you don't want to.
No.
A difference between slash and line?
Yeah. Ayin hara. Ayin hara. Take a look on page 293. This is the introduction to the slavery in Egypt. Remember that Jewish people went down to Egypt. Joseph was viceroy in Egypt. They were the upper crust, and they enjoyed the best things in the land till Joseph and all his brothers died out. And then the Pharaoh decided on a new policy. Verse 8, the new king rose over Egypt, did not know of Joseph. It's not bad. He said to his people, behold, the people, the children of Israel, are more numerous and stronger than we. Come, let us outsmart it. Let it become numerous. And it may be that if a war will occur, it too may join our enemies and wage war against us. Now stop. Stop and think. They're more numerous than we, whether that's true or an exaggeration, but that's the description we were dealing with. And it could be a war, and they could join our enemies and make war against us. And what? What is the outcome that he's afraid of?
Death.
Okay,
Take over our country.
they're going to lose the war, right? And if they're going to lose the war, what's going to happen? Well, Egypt has the Nile Delta, right? One of the most fertile regions in the world, and it's a source of great wealth and so forth and so on. So, of course, the Jews who have joined the enemy, they became the fifth column, and now the Egyptians have been defeated. The Jews will stay and take over, right? That's what he's really afraid of. What does he say? Make war against us and go up from the land. Why would they do that? Why would the Jews do that? Remember, in this verse, the introduction to slavery is being proposed. They aren't yet slaves. They have shown no inkling whatsoever of leaving Egypt. They're very happy living there, very integrated into Egyptian society, far too much so. So when he says, go up from the land, what he means is, chase us out of the land. But you don't say that. You don't say that. You don't speak about yourself that way. Putting yourself in that disastrous position. So, you see that the idea of saying the opposite of what you mean is built in. Now here, when the Torah speaks about this as their perception of why Moses is wrong, it doesn't want to come out straight and say that she was beautiful, and beautiful in physical form, and beautiful in character. So it leaves it that way. It's an example of speaking it in an indirect way. Okay, now if you look at the continuation there, which I don't have time to do, you'll see that that's exactly what it says. God says to them, don't you know that the way I deal with Moses is different from all other prophets in history? I speak to him mouth to mouth, and he's faithful to all my house. I don't speak to him in riddles, and only in clear visions, not cloudy visions. how did you dare speak against Moses? How could you dare compare yourselves with Moses' prophecy? It's just outrageous to do that. Okay, let's see if I can give you one. Yeah, let's say right here in 293.
Couldn't they argue it's a mitzvah to rebuke someone?
Sure, but
To him, not to each other? What's the issue?
I'll tell you, it's a mitzvah to rebuke someone, but it's also a mitzvah to judge someone favorably. Now, it's very interesting. The Mishnah says, you should judge each person's favorably. Being a rationalist, I was joyful when I read Maimonides' commentary on that Mishnah. He says, if you are dealing with a person who is habitually good, right, careful, appropriate, and he does something ambiguous because you read either way, you don't need the Mishnah to tell you to judge him favorably. You know very well that he has that character. Probably, if there's two ways to interpreting it, the right way to interpret it is favorably to him. If the person is known to be bad, consistently wrong, sloppy, or vicious, and he does something ambiguous, it's perfectly appropriate to interpret it as bad and vicious. You don't have to go against what reason tells you. But suppose he has a mixed record, and suppose the action is ambiguous, and therefore you could be justified either going in either direction or remaining in doubt. There, the Mishnah says, as we put it in English, which is quite right, give him the benefit of the doubt. But given the benefit of the doubt only applies when it's a real doubt. When it's a real doubt. There's a real doubt. Means real doubt in his character on this issue, and a real doubt in the issue. Then we're given an instruction to give him the benefit of the doubt and judge favorably. I think Moses deserved more credit than that. I think that, yes, you give people rebuke, but not in the face of the requirement to judge people favorably. And in Moses' case, my guess is he would go into the top level where you should have just assumed that. So what it is that triggered Miriam and Aaron this way to violate that?
Why, so they knew this too. They knew this Mishnah wanted.
Yeah, but if they knew this, then they should have judged him favorably. So I don't know what, at this point now, we've pushed the motivation back to a point where I can't, it's opaque to me. Much more should be said, but I can't say it, yeah.
Why did Moses separate from his wife?
He separated from his wife because he had to be ready for prophecy at any moment. He was the link between God and the Jewish people. Anything could happen at any moment that would require his representation of prophecy. Anything else could happen next week, could happen in a while, it wasn't going to be immediate like that. So his prophecy was different from everybody else. And although this is the Gemara says something interesting. The Gemara says 3 things Moses did on his own, and God subsequently agreed with him. So maybe I'll just expatiate on this. And one of them is that before the revelation at Sinai, the men and women were told to separate for 3 days, so that the reception of the Torah at Sinai should be a state of purity. And for those who have lingering misogynist tendencies, let me point out it's a little-known Jewish law that if a man has a seminal emission and he goes to mikveh that night, he's already pure. So if you're worried about a man's impurity, you can cure that in less than 24 hours. Why then did it require 3 days for the women to be pure? Because if a woman has relations with her husband, all the time that the semen is inside her, up until 3 days, when it comes out, it can cause her impurity. So in order that the women should be pure, they have to wait 3 days. That's the reason. So now, you see that the Torah required purity as a prelude to reception of the Torah at Sinai. After that, there's a statement, go back to your tents, which means get back together. Moses said, not me. I can't go back because God may speak to me at any moment. And that being the case, for me, it's a continuation of Sinai. So as Sinai required purity, so for me, purity is required at all times. And God then confirmed it. He said to him, you should stay in this condition with me. Don't you leave this condition. He made up his mind to do that on his own, and God agreed with him. So it indicates something which I'll just mention because it's a pet theme of mine. I can't do the whole thing in detail. When we get further into Bar Midbar, we'll do it. There is an attitude towards Torah and Torah life, which is, God's smarter than I am, and God's the creator of the universe, and he's running everything. Just do what he says. Just do what he says. Just follow the rules. And that's true for everybody, from Moses down to me, and that includes everybody else. Just don't try to outsmart God. But that's not right. That's not right. Moses did 3 things on his own, and God confirmed them afterwards. One of them was breaking the tablets. Broke the tablets. So last week's parsha.
The Daven Avichu, though, doesn't that speak to the other side?
That's exactly where I talk about it. Exactly where I talk about it in the show that's not correct. It's exactly where I talk about it. Now, whose tablets were they? They were God's tablets. They weren't Moses' tablets. And he broke them. And God later said, yeah, I agree. Terrific. And the third thing he did was, and God said, prepare the people for 2 days, and I'll give the Torah on the 3rd day. And Moses said, prepare yourself for 3 days. And God let God give it on the 4th day. And God said, okay, you want the 4th day? It's one man down with the Gemara. All right, I'll give it on the 4th day. So simply the idea of not doing anything on your own is not correct. When Solomon built the temple, he had a 14-day celebration. 14 days. Feasting and sacrifices and everything else. The last 7 days of that celebration were the holiday of Sukkot. Okay, let's do a little math. The holiday of Sukkot is in the month of Tishrei from the 15th through the 22nd. Okay, now back up another 7 days, and you get back to the 8th of Tishrei. I seem to remember the 10th of Tishrei is a special day. It's called Yom Kippur. He had feasting on Yom Kippur. He had feasting on Yom Kippur that year. Because he made a certain calculation in his mind of inaugurating the tabernacle, inaugurating this, and princes, and a whole calculation. And he said, this year, Yom Kippur, we're eating and drinking, the whole Jewish people. Afterwards, the Talmud says he thought it over again and thought maybe I made a mistake. And he had a voice from heaven, and no, that's exactly what God wanted. That's pretty drastic. Making up your mind that this year, the whole Jewish people is going to feast on Yom Kippur. So the idea that you simply follow the rules blind is wrong. A Bezdin, a court, has something called Horosh Shah. It's a legal prerogative to do things against the law on a temporary basis when they feel it's necessary and appropriate. They can execute people who have not committed a capital crime when they feel it's necessary and appropriate. So the idea of just following the rules blindly and letting God run the world is simply too simplistic a picture of how the Torah works. It works in much more subtle and complex ways. That's something that's worthwhile knowing. And as he mentioned, when the 2 oldest sons of Aaron die because they brought fire that wasn't commanded in the temple, we have to read that section carefully, and have to read what Rashi says over there very carefully, and what Chazal say to understand it. But the simple idea that just follow the rules turns out to be too simplistic. Okay.
Just the only time that Moses separated from the
It didn't require any other times because it was permanent. It was permanent. It was permanent. It stayed separated.
Rabbi Hirsch
state separated.
He stayed separated, and the legal implication is that he didn't perform the mitzvah of procreation, because up to that time he had 2 boys, no girls, and we hold that in order to perform the mitzvah of procreation, you have to have a boy and a girl. And that was one of the complaints that they had. There was a mitzvah from the Creator to have a boy and a girl, and you're separating without performing that mitzvah. And he said, yes, I am. I have to do that. And God said, you're right.
The rest of his life.
That's right. So the rest of his life. Because of this reason, he has to be ready at any moment.
And up until then, why didn't he have that reason?
Because Sinai hadn't happened yet.
I have to find a few. In the 19 Letters, Rabbi Hirsch writes about this idea, and he very much writes about how Judaism isn't a religion of innovation. We don't come up to God and say, here's the way we'd like to worship you, and then we start figuring out stuff. That God told us the way he wants to be worshipped, and we follow the directions he gave us.
But one of the
We're going
directions,
to outsmart?
but one of the directions he gave us was Horosh Shah. That's one of the
That's
directions he
right.
gave us. So,
Wait, that's what based then.
well, okay, let it be for a based. But then you see.
That's not for me. That's for a based. I'm not a based.
Okay, and many hold that it's for a prophet also, although it's a question whether it was through prophecy or not, but you see here not. So you see that that's not the message. The message is not just follow the rules. Now the question, who is, under what conditions, that's part of what I discussed when we talk about
Wait, Ben, so now be a based then. But in terms of someone like you or me,
Oh, right.
you
I
can't
didn't say.
from, you
I
said
didn't
from Moshe down to me, so it is for me. It is that way.
Look. If I say an all water diet will kill you, I'm not implying that you should cut out all water. Right? I'm just saying that it's got to be a mixed bag. I'm saying an all blind obedience diet is not the Jewish prescription. That doesn't mean there's no obedience. That doesn't mean nobody has to follow that, right? That's the contrary, not the contradictory. Right? The contradictory is just that there are rooms for both things to be done. That's all. But I come across this so often. That that's the general philosophy. That you just obey orders.
At the individual level.
Yeah.